the honour to Jeremy on Her Majesty's Coastguard.
George, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me this afternoon. Yes, as George said, I started my career in banking and insurance. Did that for 6 or 7 years. Wasn't loving it, and the financial crisis didn't help banking and insurance. So I applied, saw an advert, applied to be a Coastguard, and 7 years down the line, here I am. Just a little bit of background. I'm now a Senior Coastal Operations Officer, which means nothing to anybody, but I manage our volunteer Coastguard teams around Essex. Before that I was a watch manager in the operations room, so taking 909 calls and radio calls, and also had a secondment to London Coastguard for the Olympics and the Queen's Diamond Jubilee pageant event on the river. What I'm going to do this afternoon, I'll talk to you a little bit about the structure of the Coastguard and also how we work with the RNLI. And then I've got some pictures demonstrating some of the variety of incidents that we have dealt with over the years. First slide, it's a little bit wordy, but that is our statutory obligation. Boiled down, it means we are required to protect life, protect property, and protect the environment in the UK waters and the UK coastline. The operational structure, some of you may remember there was quite a lot in the press in the last couple of years. They have updated the structure so it's a lot more modern than it used to be. We've got maritime operations. These are the people that if you dial 999 and ask for the Coastguard, they'll answer your calls and they'll coordinate rescues. They'll decide what resources to send, whether it's a lifeboat or if it's a helicopter. And then you've got coastal operations. This is our volunteer Coastguard teams, 300 around the country, and they get tasked for a number of different activities, one of which is being engineers for the operations rooms. The maritime operations, our new structure is now in place and quite well bedded in. We've got a National Maritime Operations Centre down in Fareham, and then 9 centres around the country, plus London Coastguard. All those centres are networked together in the wonderful modern phraseology there. They're linked together in the cloud, so any of those centres can deal with any area in the country. It does offer a high level of resilience. It used to be that a Coastguard centre dealt with a specific geographic area, and if for any reason that operations centre had to be evacuated or they had a technology failure, that area was left exposed. The new setup means that shouldn't happen, it can be dealt with by somewhere else. This is our Maritime Operations Centre in Fareham. It was actually originally built as one of the fire control rooms for a project that didn't quite work. So we took it off the fire brigade's hands and it's worked very nicely for us. And then that's a picture of the inside of it. So it's quite a setup they've got going on there. And they can control the whole country from that centre, and then they can also delegate work out to the operations rooms around the country. And that is just a geographic picture of where our operations bases are. You can see that's the Fareham one. We've got round circles for the other ones. Dover Coastguard, they tell me they're special. They manage, as well as search and rescue, they do all the shipping through the English Channel. So they've got radar coverage and make sure things don't crash into each other. Not very often anyway. And coastal operations. 3,500 volunteers around the country. They're grouped into teams of approximately 10 people, depending on exactly which team they're in. They are the eyes on the ground, and they're also trained in searches, first aid, mud rescue, water rescue, and cliff rescues. Although cliff rescues isn't a huge priority in Essex. We've got one tip at Walton, where we've got some sand cliffs about 40 feet high. Although my colleagues on the southwest do laugh at me when I tell them that. They don't really think 40 feet is a cliff. They call it a gentle slope. Much like the RNLI, which is the lifeboats, which I will touch on in a moment, our teams are volunteers. They have a pager with them 24/7, and if they're required, their pager is activated, and then they go to station where they've got their blue light 4x4 and all their rescue kit. East Anglia, which is the overall area that I work within, Essex, Suffolk and Norfolk, we've got 19 Coastguard rescue teams. There's 5 full-time employed coastal operations officers, such as myself, and then we've got one area commander who's my boss and manages the whole area. And again, that's just a graphic showing where our Coastguard teams are. So you can see we've got quite a few of them and they're quite evenly distributed. And then for the lifeboats, I'll just touch on how we work with the lifeboats. Obviously the RMLI is a separate organisation, a separate charity. But when we want a lifeboat, we don't have any boats of our own as the Coastguard, we will page what they call a launch and operations manager, so a manager for that station. And then the operations room will have a phone call back in from that manager. They'll explain their case, saying we've got, for example, a person in the water at Southend. The lifeboat operations manager says, yep, that's an appropriate tasking and the weather is reasonable for that type of lifeboat. That lifeboat is then launched and then it comes under our operational control. So we'll then tell them what we want them to do and if it's a search, how we want them to search. So we are separate organisations, but we work very closely together. And there's often with the public quite a lot of confusion. A lot of people think Coastguard is lifeboats and vice versa. And we have got a variety of different types of lifeboats depending on the locations. That's again in the slide for East Anglia, so we've got a similar number of lifeboat stations to Coastguard stations. And we've got a few pictures of lifeboats. So that's an all-weather 7-class lifeboat. The first three or four pictures are all-weather lifeboats. So these are the lifeboats. There are less of them around the coast, but they can go out in any weather. No limitations on it, and when it's absolutely howling and nobody else wants to go out, these guys will go out, and those boats are very, very strongly built, very, very well equipped. Then we've got the inshore lifeboats. These are the ones, if you're out on the coast, you're more likely to see. There's more of them about. Go back. And they are small, what we call D-class lifeboats, they're about 4 or 5 metres long, and then an Atlantic 85, which is 8.5 metres long, with 2 powerful engines. They're really good for close inshore work, work along the beaches, and within sort of 5-10 miles of the shore. They do have weather limitations, so if it's very windy or very wavy, we can't send them, we have to send an all-weather lifeboat. And they are well mixed around, and they've been chosen for different locations and what type of lifeboat from experience. I haven't got a picture of it, but at Southend we've also got a hovercraft for dealing with sandbanks. And we've also got rescue helicopters. This is something else that's changed in the last couple of years. Search and rescue helicopters used to be provided by the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy using seeking helicopters. They were coming to the end of their life, so they've actually been phased out, and it's now a Coastguard contract with Bristow's providing the helicopters around the country. And we've got 2 types of helicopters. I've got some pictures of those in a second. So, and it's Coastguard S92. This is slightly bigger capacity and slightly longer range. These are based generally Scotland and Northern England, just because of the distances they travel a bit further. And then we've got Augusta Westland 189. These are predominantly South Coast based. Our closest one is Lydd in Kent. They have a bit less endurance and a bit less capacity, but they do fly faster. So they're very good for the sort of jobs we get on the East Coast and the South Coast, which tend to be time critical, but not requiring mass numbers of people. And that's just showing where the bases are around the country. So our 2 closest, as I say, that slide actually says Manston, which was where it was going to be based, and they decided to build houses instead, which was a bit inconvenient. And then to the north of this is Humberside. And if there was a major incident, they will pull helicopters in from around the country to support an operation. Now, a few pictures and some descriptions of the incidents that we've dealt with over the last few years. I'll start with maritime incidents, which for a lot of people are the ones that people will sort of associate the Coastguard with, rescues out at sea. There's a slide at the end, but maritime rescues actually are probably about 15 to 20% of our workload. The majority of our workload is beaches, close inshore type of incidents. We'll start at the fairly safe end of the spectrum. It's a nice sunny day. This was actually on the Blackwater in Essex. It's a motorboat that's had a engine failure. They're just getting towed into a place of safety. Fairly routine, bread and butter job. No particular life at risk, but if we left them there long enough, it could turn into something. So we tend to try and deal with these sort of incidents earlier rather than later. And similar but different, small angling vessel, again suffered engine failure, and it's been brought into the Kent coast by Whitstable lifeboats. And again, that sort of situation it's still quite a nice day, but that's a much smaller boat, so they're going to start having problems with hypothermia potentially much sooner. This was a yacht adrift. Again, we get reports of these. This one actually turned out has actually just broken its mooring, so there's no life in danger. But any reports such as these, we have to investigate to make sure it's not somebody that was out on their boat that's fallen off it, and try and work out where it's come from. And it's also left, it's a hazard to navigation. So they'll have towed that boat back to a mooring, a place of safety, and will have tried to locate the owner. A little bit more dramatic, this is the South Suffolk coast. Anybody knows it, it's the entrance of the River Devon up at Bordsey. It's quite a well-known river for being difficult to enter. These chaps have got it slightly wrong, and they're going to be there for a few hours. It looks comfortable enough, but we'll have a lifeboat there to assist them when the tide comes back in. And again, very common on the Essex coastline, in the marshes, at very high tides, that's all covered in water. This guy's been out for a nice sail on a nice day, and then has found himself in the middle of a marsh, which is a bit unexpected for him. So we've got the lifeboat doing their hero bits and trying to push it off into deep water. And then the very dramatic end of the spectrum, that yacht is sinking, and there's nothing we're going to be able to do about that. So that's a lifeboat taking the crew off before it goes, and those are obviously the very serious incidents we need to get to quickly, otherwise there's just going to be people floating in the water. And medical evacuations from vessels. This is the Stena Britannica out of Harwich. The Stena Britannica and its sister vessel, the Stena Hollandica, crisscrossing the North Sea to the Hook of Holland twice a day. This was actually an exercise with the fire brigade, allowing firefighters on board the vessel to fight and exercise fire. But we do this in reverse quite a lot when we're actually evacuating people with medical conditions. So somebody has a heart attack or similar on board, we need to get them to a hospital. So we use a helicopter to take them off the vessel and straight into a hospital. Moving forward a little bit, our coastal and our inland responsibilities. So this is probably about 80% of our workload, and it is quite wide variety of different areas. I've got pictures for these. But first of all, that is a map of sort of Essex and South Suffolk and a bit of North Kent. Each of the red dots is an incident, so you can very quickly see where our hotspots are, and it is generally around the beach resorts. So Southend is by far the busiest area we've got, but Clacton, Walton, Felixstowe and West Mersey are also very busy. And this is lost children, windsurfing difficulty, small sailing dinghies, people stuck in the mud, at Walton people stuck on the cliffs or at the bottom of the cliffs. So it's a very wide variety. But what you'll see out at sea, we actually don't get that many incidents at all. It's much rarer to get vessels in difficulty. I think that means the people that go a bit further offshore tend to be a bit better equipped, a bit better trained, whereas lots of people turn up at the beach with not a huge amount of necessary nautical knowledge or knowledge about the tides, so they tend to get into trouble quicker sometimes. That being said, the incidents we do get out to sea tend to be more serious. Ones on the beaches are often what we call smash and grabs. They're quite quickly over, and often they're quite easily dealt with, although obviously we have had some tragedies over this summer, which shows how quickly it can go wrong. First of all, this is a picture of an 80-foot barge that was a liverboard, so somebody's home on the River Medway. It caught fire. It was actually a candle fit off a table, as simple as that. We don't put out fires, so the fire brigade were there doing the firefighting, but we were there advising on the foam they wanted to use because it was a pollutant into the river, and also about the stability of the vessel. If they're pumping water into it, at some point it's either going to roll over or sink, potentially. So we were there advising another service.
Thank you very much.
Rope rescue. I normally call it cliff rescue. This is actually an example of where we used our rope rescue down the side of a harbour wall. This was actually North Kent. Got our rescuer there, and this is actually a dog that was in the mud and has been rescued out of the mud onto a fishing vessel. We've already rescued the owner before this picture was taken, who had gone into the mud to rescue his dog. And now we're just recovering the dog. Okay, technology failure. Let's try that again. And that's actually the dog in what we call our pet rescue bag, which is designed for small domestic animals at the top of the cliff, or at the top of the harbour wall. And that's a much more traditional cliff that we deal with. That's I think on the Isle of Wight, where they tell me proper cliffs. It's very very mean of them. They'd rather dismiss the 40 foot of sand at Walton. But yeah, not so much around here, but on the southwest and the south coast and up north, cliff rescue is actually a very big part of what we do. And we're one of the few resources that can do it. The fire brigade in some places can do it, but apart from that, we are it for cliff rescue, so we'll often be taking paramedics down a cliff to an injured casualty before then evacuating them either by helicopter or by winching them back up the cliff. Fishers Royal. This is probably a term very few people have heard. That's actually a whale in Suffolk on the beach. It was quite a lot of press at the beginning of the year. There was some up in North Norfolk and Lincolnshire that were grounding. It does happen periodically. Fishers Royal are whales, dolphins and horses, and there is a specific procedure we go through. If they're still alive, then we work with a charity called British Divers Marine Life Rescue to try and refloat them so that they can hopefully survive. If they wash up deceased, we actually fill a form out that goes to a section of the Natural History Museum, which has the option to come and do an autopsy to try and work out why they died. And we also, although the Coastguards and the Highways aren't doing a very good job here, we try and keep the public away because these animals can carry diseases that can be infectious to humans. I'll give you a little health warning, but the next picture is slightly graphic, but it is the Natural History Museum carrying out an autopsy on a large whale. And I believe they have to actually use a chainsaw to carry out the autopsy. So you learn something new every day. Water rescue. This is something each one of our 350 Coast Guard teams is trained in. In this situation, we've actually delegated to the RNLI using the boat, and the Coast Guard vehicle is on the shore, just providing an overview watch. I think there's a close-up, but yes, it was quite a small baby in a carry-cot as well as the family that we were evacuating from that car. And that's on Mersey Island, or about halfway towards Mersey Island, on the causeway that floods at high tides. And there are big signs all over it warning people, but we still get 3 or 4 a year. and mud rescue. This is something we do a lot more in East Anglia. My colleagues that have lots of cliffs tend not to have any mud, so I managed to get my own back. But this is mud rescue. This is actually a wood bridge in Suffolk. Obviously there's a helicopter involved in this as well, so this is our casualty that's just been dug out and freed from the mud. Because helicopters are very reluctant to winch people out of mud because they're very concerned about leaving half of a person in the mud. So our Coastguard teams are trained in mud rescue. They've actually used digging equipment and also water and air lances so they can squash air and water under pressure to the mud surrounding a casualty to free them. Once they're lifted out on top of the mud, we often use a helicopter to extract them. And then the picture on the right is one of the rescuers actually also being winched. Our casualty we've handed over to the ambulance service, and hopefully somebody invited the fire brigade along because we've got some coastguards that need washing down. Yeah, they're not coming back into the station looking like that. A few more mud rescue pictures. This one's actually the Isle of Sheppey in Kent, and this was a very interesting one because it was a mudslide down a cliff, but then people walking along the beach thought they could walk across it. It had quite a hard crust, but they got to the middle and then went straight through. So that's an overall picture. You can see where the cliff has come down, and this was quite a normal path until that was there. And the people got halfway across and then went straight down, chest deep in mud. And then we were working with the RNLI because that was the only way to get the equipment and personnel in, was on a lifeboat and fire service. So this is Coastguards and fire service working to get to the casualties and then to dig them out. And this is actually the same place about 3 hours later. A second group did exactly the same thing. So yeah, we had two casualties and a dog, and you can see they are very deeply in the mud. We don't normally get people that deep in mud. Normally people sort of get to about knee deep and then get stuck, but these poor people did go straight down. Dog is rescued, and a happy ending. So these sort of situations, it tend to be, the press are always very interested, but they tend to be very interested in the dog. Humans, not very interesting at all. How was the dog, and what type of dog was it? Ordnance. This is surprisingly still a big problem. Most of it's left over from the First and Second World Wars, and we are still getting, probably around here, 40 or 50 incidents a year of this stuff either washing up or being uncovered by bad weather. Torpedo like that is very rare. Smaller things, shells, mortars, is quite a common occurrence, especially places in Suffolk where there's erosion, and also Southend seems to be the sort of trigger point because there was lots of anti-aircraft activity and lots of people flying in and out of London. So what we do when we get reports of this, our Coastguard teams go down, assess it, take pictures. If they're doing as they're told, they don't just touch it and pick it up, because we're not that expert, and then we hand it over to the explosive ordnance department of either the Navy if it's below the high water mark, or the Army if it's above, and then their experts do come down and either blow it up or say it's safe. We are a Category 1 responder, which I'm sure means not a lot to most people. What it means is, along with the other blue light services and local authorities, we have a statutory duty from the government to work together collectively. So we'll deal with things which aren't specifically within our remit if we're assisting another authority. This is actually at the top of the River Medway, so quite a long way inshore of where it would normally be anything to do with us. The water level is the blue line, got to on Christmas Eve 2013. And we actually assisted the fire brigade with evacuating the, if I just go back one, you can see there is a sort of holiday or homes park, caravan park, static caravans. and we actually assisted with the evacuation of the people from there. This is one we had a picture of this bit of land earlier, which is the car in the water and the baby being rescued. This is actually at a lower tide. The picture's not great, I'm afraid, but what there is just there's actually a car that's come off the road and gone down the side of the causeway. So we are working with police, fire and ambulance, the lifeboat and the helicopter to get the people out of that car and make it safe. Again, this is actually a police helicopter base in the snow, but we were there assisting them so that they could carry on operations. And this is actually a picture from last summer, but they were out doing it again recently. But this is the M20 in Kent, with all the lorries parked up. You wouldn't really think it's a Coastguard an issue, but we were helping the police distributing water and food to all the lorry drivers that were stuck. We have the capability with 4x4s and trailers, and quite a lot of people we can mobilise, and the police were overwhelmed, obviously managing road closures, diversions, etc. So we help out with that. So we do work quite closely with the other emergency services, and where we can assist, we will. We also do, or the Coast Guard rescue teams do helicopter landing sites. So that's one of our Coast Guard helicopters. It can be their landing to pick up a casualty, somebody that's injured, something like that. Or it can be at certain hospitals that don't have a specific landing pad. Our Coast Guard teams will go inland and set up a landing site. And they've got VHF radio communications with the helicopters, and they can also deploy smoke flares to show the helicopters where the wind is coming from. And quite similar to the pictures we have of the ship and the helicopter, this is Osey Island in the Blackwater in Essex. Some of the islands that are cut off by the tide quite regularly. If there's obviously a medical emergency on the island, we will do helicopter or lifeboat evacuations from them to get to hospital. And actually even the Isle of Wight, we do a reasonable number of helicopter transfers. The Isle of Wight's got its own hospital, but it hasn't got a sort of trauma centre as such. So if they need emergency trauma care, they'll get airlifted off the island. Any questions at all?
That car breaks down, we have to have it towed to a garage.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
You charge the government?
We don't. Neither the RNLI or ourselves make any charge. So it is,
why not?
it's mainly to do with, we don't want to put people off calling, because if they're just broken down, we'd actually prefer to rescue them early on than them to get in a life-threatening situation, because they don't want to pay. So yeah, we don't make any charge, and a lot of the stuff at sea is RNLI, and it's their policy as a charity not to charge.
So I was going to touch on, following on what you said, you are government-funded agency.
We are, the Hampshire Coast Guard is government funded. The RNI is obviously a national charity.
Do they get any recognition from the government from what they do?
They don't, and they, as far as I understand it, don't want any. Because they reckon if they take funding from the government, strings attached and obligations. Also, the RNI to a certain extent is, I believe, either the richest or the second richest charity in the country. They are not. Their promotional material might say otherwise, but they're not short of money.
Good, good. Coast guards are always busy, according to your pictures. Is there any time in the year when you are not so busy?
I would say actually we are very busy with the number of incidents, but it's actually probably from April, May till end of September is probably where we get 80% of our incidents. It tends to be in December, January when it's raining, snowing, not many people are on the coast. So we are definitely summer focused. But again, things in the winter tend to be more serious. Again, people in the water, in the winter it's a lot more serious, more quickly because of the temperature.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you about, you mentioned about paramedics.
Yes.
You also mentioned about casualty transferring in your own helicopter to the hospital.
Yes.
Do you not call upon the air ambulance? Because they're quite well equipped, aren't they, to save lives?
They are indeed. We do work closely. We've got a team within the Coastguard that manages our Coastguard helicopters, and they work very closely with air ambulances. Usually, actually, it's the other way around. We often get requests to go to things that the air ambulances can't get to, or they're busy on another task. But yeah, we'll work with, so around here, the East of England Ambulance Authority to work out what the best resource is to send. Each of our helicopters, they don't carry a doctor where a lot of the helicopters do, but they do have a paramedic and a very extensive medical fit. But yeah, we work closely to make sure the most appropriate resource goes to the most appropriate place.
The very name says guarding the coast. You've talked of rescuing people and assisting oculars.
Yes.
What about actually guarding the coast? Is that your remit or is it the Navy?
It's not our remit, and it's not specifically the Navy's. The Navy obviously have a function in protecting UK waters. Certainly from a migration standpoint, the Borders Agency, Borders Force, which is part of the Home Office, it's their primary responsibility to monitor for illegal activity, whether immigration, whether smuggling. So we don't have any specific remit with that anymore. But obviously we work with them, so if we get reports of anything unusual, we'll pass that straight to them, and if they need any of our assistance, they can ask for that.
I assume they don't have boats and expertise like you.
They do have some boats. They have customs cutters. I believe there's 6 in the country, which are much larger. Again, obviously HM Coastguard doesn't have boats, but the RNI has boats. But the RNI is specifically focused on saving life, not any form of border control. They wouldn't want to get involved in that.
Yeah, got a question about that. I hear that in the Thames there is a very large ammunition vessel that sunk
Yes.
toward the end of the last World War. I understand it's still there,
Yes.
full of its explosives,
Yes.
and it's deteriorating happily, I presume. What could have happened with something like that? It must be a hell of a hazard environmentally as well.
It's the Montgomery wreck off the River Medway. It is monitored by Medway VTS, which is the port authority, so they've got visual watch over it from their office as well as radar coverage. The Maritime and Coastguard Agency, of which HM Coastguard is a part, surveys it every year, but nobody's come up with an actual plan about what they want to do with it. Nobody seems to want to touch it. So the wreck is deteriorating. The best sort of advice, guidance that I've been told is that they don't reckon there's an imminent danger to the ammunition cargo. So for the time being, it's sort of being left alone, and we'll see what happens. But yes, nobody's come up with a solution. But
There's a large exclusion zone around it.
There is an exclusion zone. It's not that large. It's only just outside the actual sort of size of the ship. So it's sort of probably 500 feet by 500 feet. So it's not massive. But yeah, there is an exclusion zone, and it is quite well monitored. I have heard rumours that if it ever did explode, then every window in Southend might be broken.
Exactly.
Already.
Got any more questions? No.
And I'm in time.
Very good, thank you. Can I call upon Ray Hamilton? What's the water?
Jeremy, fascinating talk, and obviously most people have heard of your services, but knowing how you have to join with the other services, fire, police and whatever, but the ambulance and your services doing a fantastic job, and we appreciate it very much. Hopefully we won't need to use it, but if we do, we know you'll be there. Thank you very much.
Just to say that we are walking beside the Thames on Sunday, so I've already mentioned it to you. Where we might put upon it.
Is there any other business?
And it just Don't forget to pick up your tickets with you before you go. Don't forget.
And about